Hi, my name is Maggie Goldman, and I am a Democrat running for Fulton County Commission in District 1. One of the things that I want to do on the commission is really work on the tax assessor's department. There are lots of issues with the way that the tax assessments are calculated right now, but until I can get there to do that, I want to help people understand the tax appeal process so that you can appeal an assessment that you are concerned about and make you feel more comfortable about the process in general and all of the steps. In North Fulton, the cities and the Fulton County and the school board have all accepted a cap, a 3% cap on the amount that you can be taxed on. So, and actually, maybe I'll just use my own assessment as an example. So the amount that they can tax you on can only increase 3% from your prior year, but the appraisal on your assessment is going to be market value because the state uses that value for some other calculation about taxes. So for example, our tax assessment has an appraised value of $650,000 and a 40% assessed value of $260 because they take 40% of the 100% and use that for the taxable calculation. But you can see on my Fulton operating line, there's a $30,000 homestead exemption and then taxable amount. Oh, well, this is because I just bought my house. Anyway, but so the taxable amount is 230. So they're going to multiply that 230 times the millage rate to get a value. But this is because the value that is every year reset when you buy property. So I in 2020, and then in 21 we froze it, so it's still at 650. But an example might be that say my value goes up to 700 next year, I would only be charged taxes on the 650 plus 3%, not actually 700. You just looks like you're getting charged by that because that's what it says on the form as what you're appraised at. Okay. So either way, let's get to the actual documents and I can share this with you. Okay. So you should be seeing my Q&A. So I do want to say at the beginning, I'm not a tax attorney. I do not, appeal property taxes for a living. This is not my profession. This information is purely based on my own experience as a realtor and helping over 1,000 people appeal their property taxes in both Fulton and DeKalb over the last 7 years. Okay, so actually maybe, okay, well, if you're looking at the camera, I'm going to be a little bit off as I look at the screen. Okay, so why should you appeal? So it is the right of every homeowner, and there is very little risk unless you've added square footage to your home without pulling a permit. They cannot increase your value. They cannot increase your taxes for making an appeal. Somehow they go out in a field review to check your house and you have built a bunch of extra square footage that they were unaware of, which is extremely unlikely, but that is technically the only way that they could increase your taxes. So it's not going to happen. If you appeal, you're not going to get an increase unless you have a very special case. But the reason to do an appeal is also because a computer does the appraisal. And they don't necessarily understand, the intricacies of the quality of your house, which is the quality of somebody else's house. And so, and the way that Fulton does the appraisals right now is basically built in that there's going to be some that are higher and some that are lower by definition, something we need to fix. But either way, you absolutely have the right to do this. It isn't as difficult as it may appear, and we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to take advantage of this. If I appeal, can they increase my value? So we talked about this. They cannot do that. What if I bought in 2021? So if you bought in 2021, your assessment should not be higher than your sales price. So in fact, I think I wrote this was before. I don't think it was, but I think our value we bought in 2020. So last year in 2021, the value less than 650. Maybe it was even 5 something. And so in the year last year, 2021, they would be using 2020 comps. And so in the 2020 comps pool was my sales price of 650. And so you basically cannot be assessed more than your sales price in the year of which your sales price is part of the data. So when this actually happened to us, one of the reasons I got into this was because in 2014, we purchased our first home together, not David's first home, but our first home, in right outside of the city of Decatur, unincorporated Decatur in the Big Woods. And we purchased the house for, I believe, $246,000. But we were appraised the following year in 2014 for, I want to say it was like 270, for example. And I appealed and said, I paid for this house last year for $246,000. How is it possibly 270 in the exact year where the data is 246? And they tried to tell me that it was because there was an unpermitted addition, which was technically true. The prior owner had built an extra 10 feet on the back of a house to expand the property, and the appraiser had never found out. That's too bad though for them, because when I paid $246, I bought the expansion. That was included in the $246. So while they may have lost out on taxable income that they could have received in the past, that does not mean that you can charge me more than I paid for it. When I paid $246, I paid for all of the square footage that it currently exists. And so that is what you have to appraise me at. So we won that, and we were brought back down to 246. So moral of the story is you cannot be assessed more than what you paid for the property. Perhaps if you paid a ridiculously low amount, maybe you had a non-arm's length sale. So maybe it was a family member sold you the house, or you did a deed change and it was 0, or something interesting in that case. Perhaps in that case, you could be assessed more than you paid for it. But if it's an arm's length regular transaction, you just bought a house, normally no interesting details, then you should not be assessed more than appraised for more than what you paid for. Okay. What if my house has more square footage than the tax record indicates and I appeal? So if your house has more square footage than the tax record has indicated that it has, and you appeal, one of two things will happen. You can either go through the process, get frozen, and no one will know. Or if there's a chance that they could do a field review, normally you have to ask for a field review, and you would not only do that if you didn't want people to know that you had more square footage. But there's always a chance with an appeal that they could choose to do a field check and potentially find more square footage. So my advice to you is if you have unpermitted square footage, you should just probably not appeal. Unless you are interested in sharing. Now, if you want to share unpermitted square footage that Perhaps you bought a house and the prior owner did not permit it, and you want to make sure that you are on the up and up, and you want to make sure that you're being charged fairly for all of your square footage. You could certainly appeal and tell them about the square footage increase. And you can get it frozen, whatever. You can also just, I believe, if you really wanted to tell them you had no more square footage, you could just tell them at any time of the year. You don't necessarily have to appeal to address a square footage issue. On the flip side, if your square footage on your property record card is more than what you actually have, that would be a great reason to appeal, and you can get the square footage adjusted during that process. They may accept pictures from you, or you may have to go in and they may have to come and see it. So an example for that might be, while I had gotten the 246 at the Decatur house frozen for 3 years, so 2014, 2015, and 2016, it was frozen. I think we discovered, maybe in 2015, for example, in the middle of my 3-year freeze, that they were actually counting our unfinished attic as square footage, because the square footage in the tax record was more than what we had done in an appraisal for the property when we bought it. But making an appeal in the middle of a 3-year freeze is a risk that they will just unfreeze you. And since while I was frozen, there was no negative side effect to having too much square footage in the tax record, we just left it alone. And then when we were unfrozen in 17, I appealed and had them adjust it. Now I just told them like the attic was not finished and that looked like where they were getting the extra square footage from. I sent them pictures of the attic and that was sufficient. But sometimes they do want to do a field check and they'll come out. So if the square footage on your tax record is too much, then you want to make sure you appeal and get that addressed. You'll likely get a reduction because at the very minimum, they need to just recalculate it based on the square footage that you have. And you'll want to get that fixed for the future. Okay, if I agree with my value, is there any benefit to appealing? Yes, particularly if you do not live in a city where everything is frozen for you, where there is a 3-year cap, a 3% cap. Or for example, the cap is only relevant for homesteaded properties. So make sure if you own your home in your primary residence that you have the homestead exemption for that property, because otherwise you'll be paying too much. In fact, I sold a house for a client in Grant Park, maybe 2016, and he had been paying non-homestead taxes for 10 years. About a 30% difference. So he paid 30% more in taxes for 10 years, mainly because he did not know to do this homestead exemption. It's a little late in the year for the homestead exemption. You need to file it by the first of the year, of April 1st before the assessments go out every year. But you can file for the next year at any point after April 1st. So anything received after April 1st will just count for the following calendar year. So if you realize today you don't have homestead, and you'll notice that because on your homestead form, your tax assessment form, under homestead, mine says yes, and it says HF01, which must be some sort of regular homestead exemption code. If it says no there, and it's your primary residence, you need to file. It will not go into effect for this tax year, but it will go into effect for 2023. But if you have a rental property or commercial property, these are not homesteaded properties and they do not have the 3% cap. So you will want to freeze those properties and or appeal them. And so the value of the appeal is that you will get a 3-year freeze if you go through the process. And that will save you, not like, even if you just freeze your current value, you won't save money in this calendar year, but you will save money in 2023 and 2024 because the value that they use to calculate the taxes will the value will stay the same. Now, the millage rate could always adjust a tad. The cities or the counties, though, they tend not to do that if they don't have to. So it won't be exactly the same, but the value that they start with before they calculate the millage rate to get your taxes will stay about the same. Now, folks say, well, what happens after the freeze? So 2022, this year's taxes would be considered frozen. 2023's would be frozen. 2024's would be frozen. 2025, you're going to go back to market rate no matter what. Even if you pay market rate in 23 and 24, you're still going to pay market rate in 25. Don't tell me you're going to get a big jump. They're not going to make up the difference. They can't go back and say, oh, well, you were frozen in these years. We weren't going to recoup all that money. That doesn't happen. This is all in Georgia state code. And the code specifically states that if you submit an appeal and you go to a Board of Equalization hearing, you get a freeze no matter what. So you go to the hearing and you lose, you get a freeze. You go to the hearing and you win, you get a freeze. You go to the hearing and keep your same value, you get a freeze. Quite literally, you get a freeze for walking into the Board of Equalization hearing. It's that simple. One of the things that I think we should change at Fulton County is that you should not have to actually go to a physical hearing or, the Zoom hearing or whatever they're holding in order to get frozen. There are counties that I shall remain nameless at the time that simply have interpreted that law to indicate that if you submitted an appeal at all, that you would wish to be frozen. And so they do not actually make you go to the hearing in order to freeze you. You can go to the hearing if you actually want to continue the appeal, although they don't publicize that. And so people don't know that they don't have to go, but that they get frozen and they probably don't know the difference. But I digress. Anyway, the point is this value getting 3-year freeze, you literally just have to go through the appeal process. You will get almost assuredly what we're calling a no change letter, meaning that the appraisal department has decided that the assessors department has decided that there is no changes they're going to automatically make for you, and that your next step is to go to the Board of Equalization hearing. They will then send you a letter with a Board of Equalization hearing date, and then you either reschedule or change it to a Zoom hearing, or you show up and you either present your evidence, or I literally walk in and say, I'd like my freeze, please. And then they just do their administrative work and I walk out with a freeze. That simple. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Will I need to pay the tax bill while the appeal is in process? Yes. So the way this works is the assessment letter goes out now, and it has an estimated tax based on the current millage rates for all of the taxable entities. In August, we will, the Fulton County will pass its millage rate if it makes any changes or not. And I believe, around the same time, the school board will, Johns Creek, they'll all pass their millage rates before, sometime around that period. And then once those are done, and once the appeal process has ended, so there's a 45-day period. It says a new notice, the assessment date is June 17th, and the last day to file an appeal will be August 1st. So after August 1st, they can technically start issuing tax bills. They usually come out in the fall, early fall, September, October. The millage rates will be set. The assessments, for the most part, will be determined, and then they will send out bills. Now, you do need to pay the bill while you're waiting for your appeal. Couple of options on that. Most of you, your mortgage company is just going to pay it anyway, so you're not going to notice the difference. But if you do pay your own taxes, you will, let's see, you have a choice between choosing to be billed at 85% or 100% of your assessed value. So normally the safest thing to do is just to be assessed at 100% of your value. If you're in a city where everything is at a 3% cap, you're almost going to see no change. So you should just do the 100%. If you happen to be in, say, city of Atlanta, where you have APS taxes, it's still best if you pay the 100% upfront if you can afford to do so, and then potentially get a refund after your appeal has been resolved. However, if you are paying out of pocket the assessment, you can choose to do the 85% option, which means you will pay either 85% of the new assessment value billing, or you will pay the last year's taxable amount, whichever is lower. If you have a really big increase, 85% of that new increase may still be more than what you paid last year. And so you would pay the lower of those two, and then you would be charged a bill of the difference once your appeal is completed. Now that bill or that refund is not going to your mortgage company. It is going to you. So if you can afford to do it, it is best to just pay the 100%, get a refund check later if you get a reduction. People hate extra bills, right? So you don't really want to have your mortgage company pay 85% and then get a bill later for the difference. You can do that. You're welcome to do that, but it's just inconvenient to pay an extra bill. But if you're already paying the taxes out of pocket and you're not in escrow, you're not paying it for your mortgage company, you own the property outright, it would be probably in your best interest to pay the lowest possible amount up front and then be billed for the difference afterwards. It's also a way to spread out the money if you are on a fixed income and you may not have all that money right away. Then I would also advise you're probably also paying out of pocket. Then I would say pay the lowest amount, choose the 85% option, and then hopefully by the time the appeal has been resolved, you will have more money to pay the rest of it. Okay, what sales are used to determine the value and should they? Okay. So in 2022, the sales used for your appraisal are from 2021, not a year behind from now, like a normal appraiser would do with it. That might be like halfway of 2021 and halfway of 2022. Your assessment is based on only 2021 taxes, period, sales. So I don't care about what sold down your street last week, right? 2022 sales have absolutely nothing to do with your current assessment. Only 2021 sales. And which one should I use to make it a case for appeal? I'm going to go over how I look up comps later, so we'll address that at that point. Where can I find the best comps? So I'm going to go over this later. I have a thing where I've described how to find these. But generally speaking, I mean, you can, it would be best to contact one of your preferred real estate agents and specifically indicate to them that you want comps for 2021. You can look online for sales. I mean, sales prices are all going to be the same. But often a real estate agent can help you in that. And yeah, this is explaining what I'm going to show you later. How should I determine what value to ask for? So once I show you how to look up the comps, I will then, there'll be an example. And so basically what I've done here is I've calculated the price per square foot that each of these sales came in at. So for example, this one 920 Confederate, before it was changed to United, was sold for $433,000, and at 1953 square foot, it was $226 a square foot. So I'll show you how I get all of that information. But the point is, I find the comps that I want. I average those price per square foot together, divided by the number that there are. So there's 5 there. I didn't do in the description I made for you guys, but that's okay. We'll discuss it. And then I just put, the average price per square foot was those 5 added up, divided by 5. And then they multiply that times your square footage to get the new value. Though ultimately, I would say a good rule of thumb is you're unlikely to get anything less than what your prior year value was. So I would advise that you at least pick something higher than your prior year value. A good rule of thumb, if you don't want to do all the work to do the comps, would be to just pick something halfway in the middle between your prior year and your current year, unless you have a specific reason to believe you wish to have some other value. Let's see, should I provide documentation? Pictures and list of work. Okay, asked. I do provide them like a Word document that has the comp description that I just described there. You can send pictures. I'd advise you only to send pictures if your house is very unrenovated. You can potentially submit a list of work that needs to be done if you desperately need a new roof or something to that extent. However, I have seen evidence such as that most impactful at a Board of Equalization hearing and not likely to impact the initial round. Very rarely do I see a property that is reassessed in the first round of the appeal. So if you don't end up sending in this information, don't worry about it. If you have it, you want to submit it, go ahead and submit it. Not required at all, but if you want to do it, you can. And I don't think it's particularly useful in the first round. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be, but it usually doesn't work out that way. What happens after I submit my appeal? So you can track its progress in the appeal portal. You can also actually track the progress in the tax property record portal as well. They have a couple of appeal sections there. But what's going to happen is you submit your appeal by August 1st. And then anytime after that, usually the next 3 to 4 to 6 months, you will receive your first response. Almost always, this is going to be a no change letter that literally says we have made no change to your assessment and that you will be forwarded on to the Board of Equalization. Now, oftentimes people stop at this point and say, oh, well, they didn't make a change. I guess I'm not going to get anything. That is completely incorrect. Do not stop there. They have just not decided in the first round to make any changes. Again, very rarely does this happen if they do. So the no change letter is expected, and it says on it that they will automatically forward you to the Board of Equalization. You do not have to do anything to request the Board of Equalization hearing. It will automatically happen. So you just hold on to that letter and just know you will eventually get another letter with a Board of Equalization date. You may get what we call a 30-day letter. This is a letter that indicates that they did make a change in the first round, which again, very rare, but does happen. So once you receive that 30-day letter, you have the choice to continue on still to the Board of Equalization or accept their value. Now, I'm going to tell you that when you get an adjustment in the first round with a 30-day letter, it does not come with a 3-year freeze. The only way to get a 3-year freeze with your 30-day letter is to literally show up at the hearing. So even if you agree with the change, you should still go on to the Board of Equalization hearing, check the box, I'd like the Board of Equalization hearing, whatever, submit the paper, however that works. And then you will show up at the hearing and then say, I accept this change and I want my freeze. You still have to go to the hearing to do that. You may get a reduction and still not believe it's enough. We literally did this. I believe one of my other clients was terribly overassessed, and she did get a pretty good reduction. But we went to the hearing also in addition, and because she wanted it to be more. And we had a case to make for that. So, you can get a 30-day letter of reduction on the front end and still go in, get a further potential reduction at the hearing, and get your freeze either way. Okay, so let's see what else I have. I think I did that. Okay. When will I get a response to my appeal? So again, you will not get a response until after the August 1st deadline, even if you submit today. And you can get those letters between now and the spring. strictly speaking, I thought this was only when there was a certain level of appeals, but the assessor's department is required by law to send you either a 30-day letter or a no change letter within 180 days of the end of the appeal period. So 180 days after August 1st. If they do not send you either a no change letter or a 30-day letter by that time, potentially, or also send a letter stating that they need more time. I think that was another qualifier. You may go in when you do get your hearing and ask for the ruling of this 180-day period being missed, and they are supposed to automatically give you whatever value is you asked for. So maybe you'll get lucky. They will delay on yours and do that. But anyway, generally speaking, you should get either a 30-day letter or no change letter sometime in the first 6 months after you've appealed. And then your Board of Equalization hearing letter could come anytime after that, from 3 weeks to 4 or 5 months. I mean, people get no change letters all the time and they wait months and months for a Board of Equalization letter. It just varies. So you can call and check. But the best thing to do is check on the Fulton County Tax Assessor's website. There's a couple of appeal sections, and you'll see if there's anything scheduled. What will end a 3-year freeze that is in place? So there are 3 things that will end a freeze. One is if you make an adjustment to the tax record. For example, you pull a permit, okay? Or as I described earlier, if I had called and said, hey, my square footage is different than what it says on your thing, any changes to the property record could prompt the breaking of a freeze. So we would advise you not to do that. Or if you have to pull a permit during a freeze, just be aware it is likely going to break your freeze. You'll have to redo the process. A property's selling. So if a house is under a 3-year freeze and it gets frozen in the middle, they sell it while it's in the middle of the 3-year freeze, it will just recalculate at the sales price. The freeze will be gone. I think that's it. Adjustment to tax record, pulling permits. Yeah. Okay. If you submitted a homestead exemption application by the April 1st deadline, but it is not showing on your tax assessment letter, it is very possible that they just did not finish processing all the homestead exemptions in time before the assessment letter went out. So in that case, I would follow up with the office that handles the exemptions and confirm that they did receive it. And very likely by the time the bill comes out, it will have been processed. They will make sure to process them before you actually get billed. Sometimes it just does not make the assessment letter. I would also recommend, if you're doing any homestead exemption applications, that you keep lots of records, screenshot everything, be able to prove you submitted it. How much will my mortgage be increased due to a higher tax bill? So normally what happens is your mortgage company is going to pay the higher tax bill. And then even though it has not been collecting enough throughout the year to pay it, it's going to pay it anyway. And then your account will be you'll have a negative escrow. But usually the bills come out like in the fall, so say October, maybe your mortgage company pays it in November. It's going to be the spring of the following year before your mortgage company comes back to you and says, hey, by the way, like we paid this overage for you. And then you'll have a chance to even though most companies will offer you to pay it outright to keep your mortgage amount the same, or you can spread it out over the next few months. And then they will adjust your escrow to accommodate for the higher bill, so that the next year that they collect enough for you to pay it in November. Let's see. How can I prepare for the Board of Equalization hearing? All right. So once you receive a letter with your Board of Equalization hearing date and time, you will then want to, I don't think I have it in here, but you can contact me for the information. You will want to send an email to the BOA. It's a Board of Equalization Open Records email. And then you can request all of the comparables that the appraiser plans to bring to the hearing. We can get into that more when we do a session on Board of Equalization hearings. But once you get those comps from the county, then you can review them compared to your house and see if you can find any differences. Perhaps the houses they used are better renovated than yours. And you could do that by looking at listing photos for that property. You may also want to bring your own comps. So the ones that you came up with initially, you could bring. You could also, this is the best time to bring the photos of those unrenovated houses, anything, lists of repairs, things like that. If you have an appraisal that was done around the same time, like using the right comps, because you don't want one that was just done. Like I would not do an appraisal in 2022 for a 2021 sales. You know, it's not going to work. But if you happen to have gotten an appraisal in 2021 for a refi or something, and the comps they used are all 2021 sales, you know, that might be worth bringing. But they're not going to just carte blanche accept it. You know, they have to. It's not a guarantee that they'll make an adjustment based on an appraisal. What can I expect at the Board of Equalization hearing? So the Board of Equalization hearing is a group of 3 residents local to the area of the appeal, the county appraiser, and yourself. So you should bring 5 copies of all of your evidence, 1 for you to walk through, 1 for each of the 3 board members, and 1 for the appraiser. It's going to be a short 15 or 20-minute hearing. It is literally like in a conference room at 141 Pryor Street with like 6-foot tables. Like it's not in court. It is not like a formal hearing. I mean, it is a formal hearing legally, but I mean, it is not like in a courtroom like you might expect like a hearing is going to be. Literally, it's very accessible, like 6-foot tables in a conference room, you know, not intimidating. You can ask, they'll ask you whether you want to go first or the appraiser should go first. And this is really going to depend on the evidence that you have. It's just going to really depend which one should go first. They will make a decision on the spot, perhaps in front of you, and you will leave that day with their decision. You will have the opportunity to, that's the last one. I guess that's the last question on my Q&A. You will have the opportunity to potentially do the next step, which is technically called appealing to Superior Court. But what really happens in reality is that they do like they set up like a second hearing. So it's called a settlement conference. I equate this to like a plea bargain meeting, right? Before you go and have a trial, they want to sit down with you and see if they can negotiate a plea deal, right? So basically, this is essentially, you know, before you go to court, they want to sit down with you one more time and make sure there's nothing else that they can negotiate to avoid you going to court. Most people, at least in my experience, that have done the file for Superior Court option do not actually end up going to court. They settle with the second hearing, in which you also get your freeze. You may, if you're unsatisfied with that second hearing, go on to a formal court proceeding, which I do not have experience in and would recommend that you talk to somebody else. All right, so that is it for the Q&A, it looks like. So let's go through this quick explanation of how to use the portal. So you'll want to go to this website, fultonassessor.org. If you have not made this portal account before, this is going to start for you from the beginning. So I'm using these PDFs as examples so that to protect any personal information. So you don't see my house or somebody else's house on here. So hopefully this will be sufficient. So you'll want to go to, I normally don't submit appeals. So I'm like, is that really where to go? So you go to the appeals down arrow menu and you pick property appeals. And then it's going to offer you a couple of different options. You're going to want to go to this online services link. This is going to bring it up. You want to go to click here to access Smart File. You'll either log in here, or if you have, if not, you'll need to create a new user account. You'll account registration. You'll set up an email and password. You'll hit register. You'll receive an email that you'll want to click to activate. Then you'll go back in and log in formally to your account. If you had just logged in and didn't have to create an account, you would start here. You will go to appeals, residential and commercial property. Then you will hit begin filing. You will search for your property here. So you will type in your parcel ID, which you can find on your assessment notice, or in the tax record if you need to look it up. So your parcel ID will show here, and then it will show your parcel ID, your address, and your property owner's name here, and then you will just hit start filing. It'll ask you to verify this information. Hit next. Almost always you're going to be the owner of the property. If someone is a tax professional, they would click agent. I have occasionally represented clients as an agent, not necessarily a real estate agent, but as an agent representing them for the tax assessment, for the tax appeal. So that's for a professional that is not the owner. But most likely you'll click owner, you'll hit next. Again, you'll confirm your information. You will add your phone and email. The address will all work here. You'll click next. Okay, so under homestead exemption denied, you do want to click no here, because unless you were, this is a taxability claim where this is not necessarily for homeowners. If you were denied a homestead exemption, you might most likely don't qualify for it. If you are stuck in that group where your homestead exemption has not been processed yet, and it still says no on your homestead exemption, but they've confirmed that they do have it and they will process it before the bill, just hit no. For most cases, you're just going to hit no here. Choose all grounds for appeal that apply. So you're going to choose value almost every time. Uniformity is very specific, where instead of using sales, you're going to look at how you are assessed compared to your direct neighbors. So say you all live in the same subdivision, the houses are all the same, you're being assessed for $100,000 more than your neighbor, but you have the same exact house. That is based on their assessment, not on a sale price. So usually you have to be pretty in depth to know that that's what you want to choose. Most cases, you're going to look for value. So you want to select value. In most cases, you want to select Board of Equalization. I don't have experience with arbitration or hearing officer. I'm just going to tell you, you should check Board of Equalization unless you know you need to check one of those other ones. You do have to enter your opinion of the value. This is why we have gone through ways to describe how to do that so that you can choose that. Does the owner prefer to be billed at 85% or 100% of current assessed value? So we discussed this already. Almost all of the time, I would recommend that you do 100% if you are having your mortgage pay your bills for you. If you are paying out of pocket and you want to, pay the least amount up front and then pay the rest later, as long as you understand you will receive a second bill, likely even if there's a reduction, you'll pay some difference. Then you can choose 85%. But if you don't know, I would just go with 100 and expect a refund if you're going to go with it. Reason for appeal comment, you can put nothing in this box. You can put something in this box. You can copy and paste your comps into this box. It doesn't matter either way, but it's not required. Alternatively, you can also select upload supporting documents. So here you could add a PDF of pictures, an appraisal, work needed done in the house, your list of comps. You could include that if you wanted to. And then it's going to ask you to verify and show you a draft of your appeal. And then you can print it if you want to keep a copy of it. I think you can get it in your portal later. And then you'll hit submit. You need to confirm submission. Okay, it looks like you'll have to click another thing after you hit submit. You'll get a confirmation notice in the portal, and then you should receive a confirmation email. How to find comps. All right, so increase this a little bit for you. So we're just going to go through the PDF because I took time to make it versus show you on the computer. But you will go to this clickable link. This is like an older version of the text assessment database. I'm going to go there. You're going to select sales search. You're not going to check any of these things. You're just going to go to sales search here. Here you want to check the circle for low 2, and then you're going to put in January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, because you only want sales from that period. You want to select qualified only properties because you want the ones that are arm's length transactions. They will not use the ones that are not qualified. And then you will search here for your neighborhood code, which you can either find in the property description section of your assessment notice, or you can find it in your property record on the fultonassessor.org. You may have to scroll through this looking for yours, but anyway, so you need to select that. Then you'll hit search. So it is going to bring up all of the sales in that neighborhood code. And then you don't have to select anything. You don't have to look at anything. You have to, select all or anything. Just go to the download button, make sure that Excel is selected, and you want to download these. It's just easier to manipulate them. If you download them, you can certainly work from that list if you want to. Once you download the file, I would recommend that you hide columns C, D, and E. They're just not necessary, and they just get in the way. Then next to the sales price column or the G column, I would create 2 new empty ones, which become H and I. And then I would highlight column R for square footage, and I would copy that and paste it into the H column. Once you have copied the square footage into the H column, you're going to type price per square foot in the title of the first cell in column I. And then in the second cell, you're going to put in this formula, which basically is the equal sign, capital SUM, sum. You're going to put a parenthesis. You're going to basically select the cell for the sales price. So in this case, it's G2. Then you're going to put the slash for the divide. And then you're going to select the square footage, and then you're going to put a end close parenthesis, and then you're going to hit enter. That is going to come up with the price per square foot for this property. And then you're going to take, there's like a little, if you hover over this bottom right corner, there's like a little cross that will populate. So you'll click on that and hold and carry it through the rest, all of the data set here until you get it throughout all of them. Then you will highlight the first row here. My dog just walked in. So she might make some noise. Okay, so then you will highlight first row here. You will go up to sort and filter and select filter. You don't want to just sort A to Z here because the data set will not stay together. You want to keep it together. So then you will, then once you filter, you will go to the down arrow for the price per square foot column, and you will select that point smallest to largest so that the data set price per square foot goes from the smallest price per square foot to the largest. Now you need to figure out what you're being appraised at, price per square foot. So I did this example with someone who has already requested my help this year. But basically in this example, the person was being assessed at $644,000. And the price, the square footage of the property is 2,056. So I just divided those and came up with $313 per square foot. And the year built is 2001. So the goal here is to look for properties that are close in age, in year built, and square footage that have a lower price per square foot than what you're being assessed. Try to keep the square footage within 500 square feet or more or less. So in this example, with the square footage being around 2,000, I would try to keep it within $1,500 to $2,500 square feet. As close as possible in year built when you can. Look for a minimum of 3 comps if available, and up to 5 or 6. So I would say, if you can only find 2, like say, like my neighborhood, for example, I think only had like 2 sales or something. So if you only have a very minimal number to select from, then you'll have to work with what you have. If you can only find acceptable ones that are like 2, I mean, 2 is better than 1 and is better than none, but 3 is a good number. And so if you can find 3 or, 5 or 6, really would do more than 6. 6 is like the max I've done. Like if you have so many to choose from, then I would just pick the lowest 5 or 6, or the ones that are closest to your property in other qualifiers. So here you can see I have chosen these 4 properties. The year built are all similar, so like 2003, 2002, 2000, 2006. They don't even have to be that close to 2001, which never usually happens, but they really just shouldn't be like 1914. Okay, so if we had something for like 2020, I guess we don't want brand new either. If there was something here that was like built in 1980, that would be better than something in 1930, right? So get as close as you can based on what's available to you. The priority is you want neighborhood code 1424. That is almost unnegotiable, right? They will only look at things in your neighborhood code. In the neighborhood code. Next, you're going to want to find as close as possible square footage. Now, I think here I used one that was 2688. Yeah, so that's like a tad over 2,500. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just don't pick the one that's 3,000 square feet. Okay, 3324. Like, don't pick that one. Way too bigger. Way too bigger. Too much too big. So in order of priority, I would first look at neighborhood code, make sure that is all the same. Then I would try to pick square footage as close as possible within the range I described, and then preferably year built being similar. Now, if none of these year builts were in the 2000s and they were all like 1930, whatever, then I would just pick those. I mean, I wouldn't not choose them if all you have is really old houses and yours is newer. It is what it is. But if you have the option, try to pick ones that are close in age to your property. The only other thing I would say is, ideally, it's going to be the best if they're the ones closest to your property in terms of location as well. However, I would not say that that's more important than the criteria I've already described of the neighborhood code, the price per square foot, in the square footage, and the year built. This is an odd neighborhood code where it includes Boulevard Heights and Woodland Hills, which are separated by government property, so they're not really contiguous. So the best ones in this analysis are actually 1105 Avondale and 1186 Morley, because those are in the same neighborhood, Boulevard Heights, as the subject property. But because Shelby and Knott Street are both in Woodland Hills, but it's the same neighborhood code, similar age, similar square footage. I'm going with it. They have no excuses. So let's see. I think the only thing I put, So this is an example of how I would draft the comps. So put your street address here just to protect the identity of the person I did this for. But you would put your, 123 Main Street, not just the street number and the street. You would say what it is currently appraised for, which is X number of dollars per square foot at X number of square feet. Then you would take the comps that you have. I would list them out similarly this way. So 1106 Shelby Place sold for $500,000 at 2513 square feet, and that is $198 per square foot, etc. Do the rest of them. Then you're going to add up, which I did not put in this. I did not spell that out in this. Maybe I'll need to fix that. But I mean, if you understand this at all, this should not be too difficult. So you take the four of these, so 198 plus 221 plus 282 plus 309, add those up and divide that number by the number of them that you added up. So you'll divide that by 4. And then that's how I got 252 per square foot. Again, you'll put your street address here at the square footage that you are and what the new value is. So you would take this average price per square foot and multiply it by your actual square footage to get what you think the value should be. And I would type this up and put it in that little box in the assessment appeal box, or you could just attach it as a PDF. So these notes just basically say, so one of the reasons that I've done this, they will say, oh, this isn't how we do the appraisal. Well, yes, the way you do the appraisal is a very complicated calculus problem that you cannot explain. No one can understand. It doesn't make sense. Regardless, this is a way to bring everything down to a common denominator, very visually easy to understand how they compare. And in previous Board of Equalization hearings, when they recalculate a value for you, they often recalculate a price per square foot. So it's very easy, in my opinion, if you already offer them some options of what a price per square foot analysis would look like, because they, on the spot, are not going to go through the calculus equation that is involved in order to do that. They're going to just pick a number or support a number the appraiser comes up with, or support a number that you come up with, or just randomly pick a number. But they may very well do a price per square foot analysis, and this is an easy way to show comparison. All right, so I will just end again by saying that I'm not a tax. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not employed by the county. So for any reason you pursue these strategies and they're unsuccessful for you, I'm not guaranteeing that they will work. This is just my experience after helping over 1,000 homeowners over the last 7 years and my personal experience appealing. If you have any questions, you can email me at appeal@maggie.fulton.com. You can call me. There's my cell phone number right there. And I hope if you have any questions, you will let me know. And happy appealing.